Hello there, everyone. This is Rob, the baseball time traveler. Thanks for joining me today as we're going to take a personal journey for me. It's my 15 minutes of fame, and I don't have any relationship with Thurman Munson. I truly respect the man and the player, but my relationship to him will kind of unravel as the video develops. I'm going to be showing quite a few baseball cards, and I'm also going to be showing some rugby cards and some Olympic cards. So stick around if you want to take a little journey with me. It's my 15 minutes of fame. And it occurred on October 15th, 1977, which was a Saturday. I was in London playing for the U.S. national rugby team against England at Twickenham, which is rugby's version of the Yankee Stadium. At the same time, later that day on the Pacific coast, 8 or 9 hours later, Thurman Munson and the Yankees were playing in Game 4 of the World Series against the Dodgers in Los Angeles. During the game that I was playing, I scored a try in the last minute of the game, and a try is rugby's equivalent of a touchdown in American football. Our team lost the game, but we made history because we were the first U.S. national team to play overseas since the 1924 Olympics. Now, later that day, October 15th, the Yankees beat the Dodgers 4-2, and Thurman graced the cover of the World with the World Series you'll see there on the right-hand side. And the Dodgers completed a double play, and this was in the top of the ninth inning. But let's go back to the beginning, as this story has some roots that you need to hear about. Baseball and rugby actually started pretty close in time in history. Rugby got its roots in 1823, and as most of you know, baseball is attributed to have commenced in 1839. I want to show you some cards now, just to keep your interest. The first rugby game was played in 1823, and it was kind of a story that essentially some schoolboys were playing at rugby school, literally rugby school in the town of Rugby, and they were playing a soccer game, football for those of you who are European who might be listening. And William Webb Ellis got a little frustrated and picked up the ball and ran to score. And this was something that eventually was the start of rugby. And one of the first rugby cards that I could find that actually depicts American football, but it's identified as a rugby card, is the 1932 Sinella. And this is a German card, and I thought it was really a pretty card. So I wanted to show you that. And then we've got another artistic card that is worth taking a look at. And this is a baseball card that depicts a famous ball player. Baseball was invented or attributed to Abner Doubleday, but that myth has been debunked historically. Abner Doubleday actually was a Civil War general and is credited with firing the first shot from Fort Sumter in Charleston, which started the Civil War in 1861. But it's a little sketchy on his relationship with the invention of the actual game of baseball. But here's a historic card of a historic player that hopefully will keep your interest. This is Babe Ruth, the 1929 Churchman's Cigarettes card of Babe Ruth. And what I love about the older cards is the artistic renderings of the cards. And I'm going to show you a few older baseball cards. Here's George Selkirk, who coincidentally took over for Babe Ruth when Babe left the Yankees in 1934-35 timeframe. And we have another card of a famous catcher, since Thurman Munson is one of the captains and one of the most prolific catchers in Yankee history, along with Yogi Berra. Here's probably the predecessor to both, and a very well-known player by the name of Bill Dickey, very good friend of Luke Gehrig. Now we'll take a look at some historic artistic rugby cards. This is from the 1901 W.O. and H.O. Wills card. And that's kind of a nice artistic rendering there. And here's a 1925. You'll recognize this set. The baseball version of this was George Sisler depicted, but here's the rugby version of the card. Coming a little closer for you. And believe it or not, in England, Europe, wherever rugby was played at the time, including New Zealand, Australia, and around the world, here's some original rugby cards. And these are from the early 1920s. It's a Scottish national player. And here's a representative from Ireland. Very cool cards, I think, and eventually I may get them graded. I did get one graded. This is an all black, the New Zealand All Blacks, probably the most famous rugby team in the world. And this is from 1936, Mitchell Cigarettes. And so that'll take us through some of the early rugby cards and early baseball cards. Now we move to my personal story. It starts really at the University of California, Los Angeles, UCLA. I started there as a freshman in the fall of 1973, and I joined a fraternity house in spring of 1974, and this was Sigma Nu at UCLA, and I engaged in all the fun activities. I'd go to the football games, and at that time, UCLA had a pretty good football team. The first year, they actually... when I was a freshman, they were averaging like 50 points a game. This was when the wishbone offense was very popular, and Coach Pepper Rogers was running the show at UCLA. Then my sophomore year, Dick Vermeil, who many of you may know from coaching the Super Bowl champion Rams and back in the day, and the Philadelphia Eagles back in the 80s. I walked on to the football team and ended up being selected. But I got hurt in the first game, and during my rehabilitation, I was having too much fun at the fraternity house, and I was basically going to be the third string, punching bag for the varsity team. So some of my fraternity brothers who were playing rugby at UCLA suggested I give it a try, and I thought, well, I've never played rugby, but they said, look, go out and play some flag rugby on the intramural team and see what you think, because I happen to be a pretty fast guy. And I went up, and that's me depicted in the distance there in the middle of the shot in the white shorts and the white socks and white shoes. And I got my start playing rugby on the intramural field at UCLA, which I'll give you another vantage point. This is looking down from the dorms, and we played out, that's what we used to call the intramural field, which is now got several more buildings on it. It's got a formal soccer and rugby stadium. And UCLA has got a little different look than when this photograph was taken. This is probably from the early 1970s, late 60s timeframe. So, went out for the rugby team and really enjoyed it. I had no idea what I was doing. I was a fast guy, so everybody just said, look, you're going to be out on the wing. We're going to just throw the ball to you, and when you get it, run like you can and try and score. So that was really what I did, and I had pretty good success with it. And we actually, here's one, I only have one color photograph, but this is, we played against Cal, and any of you who are rugby players watching this, Cal is one of the most formidable rugby programs and has been for 30 plus, 40 plus years now. And Cal has been coached by Jack Clark, who I actually happened to play against and play with on a couple of all-star teams back in the day. But we beat Cal this day 10-8. This was in February 1977. And this was the last time, I hate to admit it, the last time UCLA beat Cal in a rugby game. But we had a great game and really enjoyed doing that. And then later that season, we went to Monterey, which is where they play the national championship. And we went up to Monterey, and there's a photograph of me. I have limited photographic documentation of my rugby career. Back in the day, we didn't have the access to phones and cameras that we do today. But that's me right there in the middle, playing defense. And this was in the semifinals. This was the team visiting from New Zealand, and we beat them to get to the finals. and we played against Santa Monica Rugby Club. So we were a college team playing against frankly, a lot of UCLA alumni and USC alumni and other club players. And we had a great match, and we ended up coming in second. And here's the plaque from that tournament. But we were declared the national champions as the best college team performing in that particular tournament. So now we move a couple of weeks later, and I had been selected to represent the Southern California All-Star team, representative side they call it. And then at the trials in Southern California, I was selected to then represent the next tier on the route to becoming a national team member. Played for the Pacific Coast Grizzlies, and we went to Greeley, Colorado, and I participated there and was selected to represent the national team. And I'm right there in the middle row there. I'm to the right-hand side of the gentleman who's got less hair than I do. So I was actually the youngest player in the team, and boy, was I intimidated, because I, at this point, probably had played 20 games of rugby, and some of these guys have been playing rugby for 20 years. So here's just some of the clippings that from back in the day, and this was kind of a cool thing. I was named to the team, and I'd show you all the letters I got, from the coaches and so forth, but time doesn't permit that. So what I did was, after this, I graduated in June of '77, a month later, and I spent the entire summer training like crazy. And for those of you who remember the original Rocky movie, the steps that he ran up in Philadelphia became famous. And these were steps at UCLA called Jan's Steps. And I used these. I was a big Rocky fan. I must have seen that movie 12 or 15 times, because one of my fraternity brothers worked at the theater. So I just kept going back in. He'd let me in for free. And I watched that movie over and over again. And there's the famous shot. So by the time I got ready to leave, packed my bags, we headed to West Point, and I was in the best shape of my life. We stayed at West Point for 3 days. It was actually the first time that all of the team members got a chance to meet each other. And we scrimmaged against the West Point cadets, had some great matches there, and just some great practice sessions. And it was quite a thrill living in the barracks and getting to meet some of the young players. And frankly, I was the same age as most of the cadets, but many of my teammates, I think the average age of our team was 28, and I was only 22 at the time. So we end up going to England, and we arrived, and we were on a 6-game tour. And we went to, we played against the Civil Service, then we went down to Cornwall, played there. Then we went back to Coventry. And the reason why I mentioned Coventry is that this was a game where I actually sustained a serious concussion. And I tackled somebody, went back down, snapped my head off the deck. And the score at the time, we were ahead 6-3. The final score of the game ended up being 33-6, and we lost. And apparently I played the entire game, but I have no recall of that whatsoever. I went to one of my teammates after the game. I said, did I play badly? And they said, no, we all played badly. We just got killed. But here's an interesting sequence of photographs that I think people might enjoy. You might recall that my first introduction to rugby was at the flag football field, and you see my pose there, and I'm out there on what they call the right wing. And 2 years later, in the game I just referenced, there was a photograph taken. This was, I don't know if it was before or after I was hurt, but if you look there by the goalposts, there I am standing representing the national team. And this is less than 2 years later. And talk about a intimidating place to be. Here I am representing my country, and I'm still trying to figure out all the rules of this game. But I thought that was a great contrast in photographs. So let's get back to the tour a little bit. It was kind of fun because we went to rugby school, and I'm kind of searching around now for some photographs here. and see what I can pull up. So here's one of our practice sessions. Here's some of my teammates, and we're actually at Rugby school. And we got a nice tour of the facility, and here we are after our workout. One of the students walked us around. There's a statue of William Webb Ellis. Here's a photograph of our team, and I'm there in the front with my fancy Italian stallion shoes. I remember I was a Rocky fan, so at that time that was pretty cool stuff. And the big collared shirts. But that's our team, kind of ragtag. But now we got formal. There's our formal team picture, and I'm in the second row there, third from the right. And the gentleman to my immediate right there, his name's Steve Gray, and Steve and I played on the UCLA team together, and we worked out extremely hard all summer. And I'll always remember, doing the extra workouts just to get that extra edge, because, especially for me being a rookie, I needed to be as fast and as strong and as physically fit as I could be, so that I wouldn't detract from the performance of our team in any way. Now we moved to Cambridge. This was the fifth game, and as you recall, I had a concussion in the third game. The fourth game we went up to Newcastle, and then I missed that game. But a few days later, I'm back on the pitch, as they call it, and I found these photographs, and this was like a flashback, because nothing has really changed. And I remember this game specifically, and I remember those stands there that you see to the left. And I actually scored twice in that game. Here's the little short program welcoming us. We were there for a couple of days. We stayed in the town of Cambridge. And here's a program. And I actually bought this off the internet about 20 years ago. And you'll see in the right there, there's a handwritten, the score. We won the game against Cambridge, 20-18. And you'll see next to my name, Duncanson, 2. And that I scored twice in that game. And what's important about that is that because I was a rookie, and because we had players from all over the country, sometimes political decisions had to be made, frankly, and sometimes that would impact the selection of players. But I was fortunate enough to be able to play well in that game, and I think I convinced people that with my speed and despite my lack of experience, that I could be an effective player for the team. And on the at dinner, we had a formal, if you ever saw the movie Chariots of Fire, which I'll be talking about in a few minutes here, we actually had a dinner in the kitchen in a basement in Trinity College. Talk about a historic location, and just total class. Everybody's dressed perfectly, wearing our suits, and it was such a memorable evening to be there. And here the next day, we get here's some press clippings, and we spread their wings. We got our second victory of the tour. We had been beaten 3 times already, but this was our second victory. And there's yours truly, about 4 feet in the air. I still had some jump in my legs at that stage, but this was kind of a fun photograph that the newspaper had some fun with. And this particular game, because I had played so well, I ended up being selected, and here's the little deal that I was going to end up playing at Twickenham against the England national team. And I was scared to death, but thrilled out of my mind that I was going to get that opportunity. Now we're going to do a little bit of historical reference here. As I mentioned earlier, we were the first national team to go overseas since the 1924 Olympics. And the U.S., coincidentally or ironically, despite us having relatively weak rugby teams historically compared to the rest of the world, especially England, Scotland, Ireland, New Zealand, South Africa, Australia, all these teams, we ended up winning the gold medal in 1920 and 1924. And then after 1924, rugby was removed from the Olympic agenda until 1996, when they reintroduced it in the sevens format that is still being played today. But here's an actual postcard that you see there. And I was able to obtain that. I thought that was a great piece of art. I really am attracted to art cards, and I thought that was pretty cool. And the 1924 Olympics was the same year that the famous movie Chariots of Fire documented the relationship with Eric Liddell and Harold Abrams. And here's a photograph, obviously, of the U.S. Olympic team. Here's the venue, same stadium, Cologne Stadium in Paris, and it's set up. You can see the rugby posts there. So they played this in May, and the track and field portion of the Olympic Games was played in July, or conducted in July. And here is a great photograph, I thought, of the match. And the USA won the gold medal, beat France, the home team. And apparently I heard stories, or read stories, I should say, that the U.S. team was not treated too kindly by the partisan French crowd. But despite that, U.S. prevailed, won 17-3. And I wanted to show you two of the main characters from that movie, Chariots of Fire. I recommend you see that. Here's Harold Abrams, and he won the 100 meters. It was a very big upset. And he prevailed on the 100 meters. And then Eric Liddell, who originally was projected to win the 100 meters, but decided not to participate in the qualifying rounds because they were conducted on a Sunday. And Eric Liddell was a very strong Christian, and his religious beliefs prevented him from competing in any sports on Sunday. And he then was moved over to the 400 meters and ended up winning the gold medal in the 400 meters and set a world record at the same time. And there's Eric Liddell. Okay, now we move to Twickenham. Fast forward to 1977. And all of a sudden, we've left West Point. We've played 5 games in England. And I'm frankly getting a little bit of homesick, but who can get homesick right before you're playing for your country? Stars and Stripes go up at the stadium, and you're playing for your country, wearing your country's uniform. And the day before the game, here's an overhead shot, and the day before the game, we got a chance to go to the stadium itself, and there's a couple of my teammates down there. And it's quite an awesome thing to be able to go to the stadium empty and just walk around on the grounds and knowing the history of this game and so forth. And here's another shot taken, and I apologize for the quality, but these are, handheld cameras. When you had film in the camera, and you just prayed that the pictures would develop properly. But we were there, and I was just so amazed at the grass. I mean, look how perfect that is. And for 1977, that's pretty good. But speaking of history, here's a card that depicts the King of England and how big a game, not our game was, but here's the King of England, 1935, at Twickenham greeting the English team. And then here's a photograph of the English team, 1935. And if I do this correctly, here's I'm going to show you that a little bit later, but here's the program. And I still have a copy of that. I think I've got it here for you just to prove I got all this stuff. I kept this for years. There you go. And I've got actually a signed copy that I unfortunately put in the sun, or had it on my wall, and sun kind of faded it out. But despite that, I still have these nice crisp ones. So here's a photograph of the stadium, and if you recall, here's the same vantage point, and how coincidental is that almost 50 years later, the internet is able to pull up a picture like that for me. So, all right, so it's the USA versus England. Here's the ticket to the game. October 15th, 1977. On Saturday afternoon, right there at Twickenham, Duncanson and his colleagues on the U.S. national team, the Eagles, would meet England. And that's a quote from a magazine we'll talk about a little bit later. All right, so here's the photograph that I was talking about, where the England, that's our national team, and that's something that it's in the same position. And I've lost track of where did I put that card? That's somewhere in there. Anyway, same position. I'm there in the second row on the far left side. Guy with a full head of hair. Still have a lot of hair, but not a whole bunch, not as much as I did. And that's the head coach to my right-hand shoulder there, Dennis Storer, who was instrumental in my career for sure. And here's a photograph that was in one of the local magazines following the game. We had a great following. There was several U.S. rugby clubs had come over, and the fans were going crazy. And talk about a thrill to be there on the field wearing your team's uniform, your national team uniform. The stars and stripes are going up the flagpole. They're playing the U.S. national anthem, and you've got crowds in the stands waving the American flag. That was a moment I will never, ever forget. So here's an action shot of the game. This is what we call a line out, and it's probably equivalent to tip off in basketball, line of scrimmage, if you will, for football, that kind of thing. So here's a photograph taken by one of my teammates who was a reserve for that game, or may not have even been the reserve list, but he was kind enough to use my camera and took a photograph of me, and I'm number 14 there on the right wing. And I thought that was just a great shot. And there I am in that standard pose. I'm always ready with my hands on my hips. So here we go. All right, so with about a minute to go in the game, and we were down pretty far. It was, I think, 37-7 at that point. But we were not going to give up. And fortunately, we had a line out. The ball came out to the backs, and my teammate kicked ahead, and I was able to pick up the ball, and I was at about probably the 40-yard line when I got the ball. And with rugby, there's no blocking. So if you see in the photograph there, I had 3 guys to get to, and you see the base of the goalposts. And I was fortunate to be able to make some evasive maneuvers and was able to score. And that was a thrill that I will remember. It's ingrained in my brain. And it was videoed. I saw videos of it later, and it's just one of those once-in-a-lifetime thrills. And the crowd just went nuts. And back in the day, unlike what we do today, where people are pounding their chest and doing all that goofy stuff, jumping up and down, and I just kind of went back and just did it. And I guess I was modeling athletes that I saw back in the day, like Mickey Mantle and Willie Mays, and seeing film of Lou Gehrig, and they didn't show anybody up. And I don't mean to sound like I'm grumpy old man here, but I just think sometimes too many of today's athletes make it all about themselves and not about the team, and they're trying to show up the other side and so forth. But this was something that it was a thrill of a lifetime for me, and I was just so excited to have that opportunity to play for the United States. And what we did, let's see, I want to show you a few more things here. Some photographs. This was from a magazine. Sorry for all the clunking. But before we get to the World Series, this was a photograph of my teammates. That's Mickey Ording, Jay Hansen, and Eric Parthmore. And then in the lower right there, that's Jeff Lombard coming in. And you'll see a couple of heads squeezing through there. That's Greg Sweeney. And I think that's Gary Brackett in there as well. But great photograph. All right, so now we go to the Thurman Munson side of this. And I'm sorry I'm going a little long, but I'm not going to hurry through this. And I just want to do it justice. So now we go to the 1977 World Series. And there's the man, Thurman Munson, Steve Garvey coming in. This is game 1. and they're playing at Yankee Stadium, obviously. And this was a big call early in the game, and the umpire called Garvey out, and Garvey actually disputed the call, said the umpire was at a bad angle. Bottom line was he was called out, and check out this next little slide. This was classic, I thought. Look at Thurman. He's going, yeah, I got this. So I just thought this was great. And then it kind of reminded me of Thurman looks like he could have played rugby very easily. Check this out. There you go. All right. So that's the three fellas on the right-hand side. That would be the British Lions. This would be an all-star team comprised of all the teams from Scotland, England, Ireland, and Wales. And you don't think Thurman could fit into that front line and be a prop or a hooker? And here, even closer, this is Billy Beaumont, England. He played against me, and probably he and I butted heads a few times. And despite my concussion 10 days earlier, I was still in that game taking some lumps. But I just thought this was great, these two guys together. All right, so let's get to Dodger Stadium. That's what you've all been waiting for. After all, this is the Baseball Time Traveler channel. So we're at Dodger Stadium. This is October 15th, the afternoon. And you'll notice the Dodger Stadium back then looked a little bit different. The wall, that famous powder blue, and the air quality, if you look on the upper part of the photograph, a little bit smoggy back then. That's just the way it was. Ron Guidry was the starting pitcher and threw a beautiful game. This was the only action photograph that I could find. And there's Thurman and Reggie Smith's at bat. Dodgers lost that game to the Yankees 4-2. And as I showed you earlier, Thurman was on the cover of Sports Illustrated being thrown out as first leg of a double play. But what most people remember the 1977 World Series for is Game 6. And at this point, this was October 18th, I believe. So 3 days later, and I actually had returned from England and was able to watch this game at my old fraternity house. And this was a very historic game. And how many of you remember these home runs? Reggie, 1, 2, 3. 3 pitchers, 3 pitches, 3 home runs. And if I recall my statistics correctly, Reggie actually had a home run in Game 5 in his last at bat. And then at the opening day of the following season, 1978, also hit a home run. So if I'm correct me if I'm wrong, but I think he hit 5 consecutive home runs. And that's Reggie. All right, so let's take a look at some baseball cards. I know you've all been waiting for that. Okay, so we showed our buddy Steve Garvey earlier. There's Steve's rookie card. And of course, we've got to show Thurman's rookie card. There you go. I don't have the famous 1971 card. Someday maybe. But I thought this would suffice for this video. And Game 4, we got to show some of the players there. So we got Ron Guidry. There's Davey Lopes, who was playing second base for that in that double play combination with Bill Russell. Speaking of Bill Russell, here we go. And Steve Garvey. And we'll finish up with the 2 gentlemen depicted in the photograph there. There's Reggie. Great, great photograph there. I think that's a powerful looking swing, start of it. And then the captain, Thurman Munson. Okay, so now we move forward to October 24th. What's the big deal about October 24th? Well, at this point, I was working in a small shoe store owned by a little company at the time called Nike, and the store was called Nike Westwood. And actually in 1977, it was still called the athletic department, later named Nike Westwood. But at this point, October 24th, I was working, and I think I was an assistant manager at this point, might have even still been a head clerk, something like that. And here I have a college degree, but I'm working at a shoe store. That's not the important part of the story, but what happened was I'm in the middle of working, and one of my fraternity brothers walks into the store, and he's got a Sports Illustrated in his hand. He goes, "Rob, you're in Sports Illustrated." I go, "What?" And he goes, "You're in Sports Illustrated." And I go, "You got to be kidding me." He goes, "No, they've got an article on the Rugby." And this is how the article started. "If, like Rob Duncanson, you have been playing rugby for a mere 2 years, the stadium at Twickenham is intimidating, as befits the world headquarters of the sport." Now, the story behind this was the day before, if you remember the photographs I showed you where we visited the stadium the day before the game, we were sitting up in the stands for a few minutes, and apparently there was a Sports Illustrated journalist up there in the stands sitting in front of us. And unbeknownst to me, he was a writer, and I was talking to some of my teammates, and I was just kind of going off saying, I was just, gosh, I've given I think the quote was, "I'd give an eye tooth to be here, and holy Colombo, this is just unbelievable that we're here." And I'm a 22-year-old bright-eyed kid, and here I am playing on the premier rugby pitch in the world, and it's kind of like being a 19-year-old major leaguer playing in World Series and having only played, been brought up in September. And it was just mind-boggling to me that I was in this position, but I did enjoy it. And the fact that it was documented in Sports Illustrated and Thurman's on the cover, I just thought that this kind of topped it all off. And I just want to say that this was a thrill of a lifetime for me, and it's my 15 minutes of fame, and it's something that I hope many of you, if not all of you who are watching this, have had your 15 minutes of fame. And if you haven't yet, I hope you do have one, because it's something that's very special. So go have a good rest of the day, and we'll see you next time.